guys, if you're just joining in, thanks for being here. Just going to wait a few more seconds, give more people a chance to log on, and then we'll get started. For those of you joining, once you've joined, you're going to see a poll pop up on your screen. If you just take a moment to vote in that poll, which technologies do you see having the biggest impact on healthcare? Advancements in AR and VR, artificial intelligence, advanced surgical robotics, or other? Be sure to include it in the comments. What about our panel? Aditya, Maria, Parry, what technologies do you see having the biggest impact on healthcare? Is it advancements in AR? Is it AI? Is it advanced robotics? Is it something else?
I think I'll start and just say AI. But maybe that's just because I'm biased by what I'm working on. But I mean, I think it's going to be a combination of these things working together that will actually have the biggest impact. But that's a cop-out answer.
Yeah, for sure. I think I would second the AI answer. I think there's a lot of innovation that can unlock. Working in combination with other digital health techniques.
I will stick to the cop-out answers, all of the above, but that's partly only because we see a lot of advancement in advanced surgical robotics also, and we're actively working on some of those projects. So we haven't gotten to a point where we've gotten a lot of traction on AR, VR, especially in the healthcare domain. However, advanced surgical robotics and AI, I would pick those two.
Brilliant, good stuff. All right, well, look, I think we've given enough time for people to join. Appreciate people will continue joining as the webinar goes on. But let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you're logging in from today. And welcome to our fourth BioTalent Social live panel discussion. Today we'll be talking about the massive impact that technology has had on the medical sector and how it can both inspire and limit medical innovation. So in terms of what you can expect, we will have an hour of a panel discussion followed by a live Q&A at the end of the session. This will then be followed by a half hour of networking for those that wish to continue the conversation further. So my name is Darren. I will be the host and chair for this webinar. In terms of BioTalent Social, who we are, what we do, we aim to connect our network by discussing the relevant topics that are impacting the life sciences industry. And our aim today is to discuss how advancements in certain technologies is impacting medical innovation and how these advancements affect our industry as a whole. In fact, a recent survey found that only 7% of healthcare and pharma companies said they had gone digital, compared to 15% of companies in other industries. So what this means is that the space for digitalizing in healthcare is absolutely massive. And with more and more companies adopting a digital strategy, it's clear that technology and digital health is inspiring the future of healthcare. Now, we want to make this discussion as engaging as possible. So if you do have any questions for our panel throughout the webinar, please do ask them in the side panel or in the Q&A section, and we will get through as many as possible at the end of the session. Lastly, before we kick things off, just note that this is being recorded. It is live streamed across LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, and it will be uploaded to our BioTalent Social YouTube channel, where you can also access all of our upcoming webinars and podcasts. So to get started, I'd like to introduce you all to our amazing panel of industry experts from 3 amazing medical firms. We'd love to know more about our audience too, so please do drop a note in the comment box. Let us know where you are in the world watching this webinar. And now over to our panel. So if you could introduce yourself, your role, your experience, and give us all a fun life sciences related fact that really impresses you. Maria, let's start with you.
Thanks so much, Darren. Hi, everybody. My name is Maria O'Callaghan. I'm the VP for Delivery at Brightsight in Europe. So we are a global platform for building regulated digital health solutions. We work on scaling digital health The really interesting part of our business is that we provide that regulated platform for building and scaling, especially SAMD, so software as a medical device component. So that's the kind of our unique selling point, really. We provide the regulated infrastructure that allows people to bring all sorts of use cases for patients to the market. So really excited that we're here today, that we're talking to everybody and telling you, letting you learn a bit more about us. My favorite life science fact, this is a tough one, especially given that Darren just sprung this on me about 2 seconds beforehand. So, maybe come back to me on this one. I will graciously cede my time to the next person and come back with a better fact.
We will come back to you, Maria, no worries. Thanks for that, brilliant. All right, next up we have Perry.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. My name is Perry Gadwad. I'm the head of digital at Cambridge Design Partnership. What we do at Cambridge Design Partnership is we are an end-to-end innovation partner for all of our clients. What that means is we essentially go from very early user research all the way to commercialization for products across all sectors, including consumer, healthcare, and industrial. What we're specifically trying to do in digital is we're strengthening our existing capabilities to be that partner who can actually go from back of the envelope sketch all the way to commercializing your products across the globe, also keeping in mind all the regulatory requirements that are needed to launch a product, especially in the healthcare industry. So that's about me, and that's about Cambridge Design Partnership. Looking forward to the session. And you asked about a fun fact about life sciences, Darren, is that what you asked?
That's right, Perry. Give us your best one.
I'd say something controversial. I feel like the biggest impediment for any innovation, especially in today's day and age, is technology, because there has been a lot of inside out innovation that's happening, and there's less and less emphasis on building products that the users really want or need, rather. So having that outside in approach, where thinking about the users first and not building products that nobody wants to use. That we see a lot in life sciences industry also. And as the second one, I have a second one. In the life sciences industry, everybody wants to go digital, but they don't know where to start. And that's really a fun fact. And it's a growing industry, and people are still learning as we go.
Nice. That's definitely something we're going to be discussing today as well. Thanks, Perry. And last but certainly not least, we have Aditya.
Hi, thank you, Darren. Yeah, so I'm Aditya Khosla. I'm the co-founder and CTO at Pathia. As my background states, the goal of Pathia is to improve patient outcomes with AI-powered pathology. So some of you might be wondering, what is pathology? So pathology is the field associated with cancer diagnosis. I guess I'll roll my fun fact into the introduction of the company. So this, for me, my background actually is very much in the computer science side of things. So the first time I met my co-founder, I was like, what's a pathologist? Why do you guys exist? And the story that he shared with me, which is one of the fun facts, or I guess it's not that fun, but an interesting fact about pathology. So firstly, pathology is the area associated with cancer diagnosis. So a pathologist's job is literally to tell you whether or not you have cancer. And one of the things that he had shared with me, which continues to motivate me to this day, and a huge part of the reason why we founded the company, was this simple experiment that they had done around pathology diagnoses, where pathology is often seen as the gold standard. And what they had done was said, okay, let me take one patient sample and show it to, say, 30 different pathologists. And since pathologists are supposed to give you that, final definitive diagnosis, you would expect that, one sample, which might be your sample, you either have cancer or you don't have cancer. And that should not be a function of which doctor you're seeing, right? And unfortunately, what they found was that for almost about 30% of the cases, there was a near uniform distribution of diagnoses. So meaning, half the pathologist saying it's cancer, half saying it's not cancer. And that's a little bit scary. And that's exactly what we're here to fix, using, artificial intelligence to augment pathologists to help them make better diagnoses, as well as match patients to the right treatments for diseases like cancer. And we also work on liver disease and a number of other areas. From the startup side, we are now about 600 people and cover a broad range of areas within pathology. And we can talk more about that in the panel. So thank you for having me here, and excited to chat with everyone.
Nice, brilliant, good stuff. Thanks for that. Some interesting facts. I guess mine was quite different. Mine was that if you unravel the human's DNA, it could go to Pluto and back 17 times.
Good fact as well.
Great to get those introductions. So let's get started. I think to start things off, interestingly enough, actually, I was reading an article by the National Public Health Service of Wales, and it was on advancements in technology, and they identified several key areas in which advancements in technological innovation is making a huge impact on patients' lives. Some of the examples that they gave were enabling patients to remain in their homes rather than be admitted to hospitals, making remote diagnosis and treatment possible, reducing treatment times, and enabling clinicians to treat more patients effectively. Now, PathAI, Cambridge Design, and Brightsight are all examples of companies utilizing technology to impact patient care, right? And with the growing ecosystem of digital health and advancements in technology, we're seeing more and more companies coming out of the woodwork with groundbreaking, innovative products to improve patient outcomes. However, there's no arguing that a massive roadblock these companies face will be the regulations and the standards. And as technology advances, as will regulations and standards, right? So my question to the panel, and maybe Maria, we can start with you on this. How do you see regulations and standards impacting innovation in healthcare?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think 6 months ago, I would have probably said that regulation is hampering things. It's a slower process. It slows down the pace of innovation. I think what we've learned through the reaction to COVID and the agility that a number of the notified bodies and the authorities have shown is that there are pathways through if we work together for the ultimate aim of supporting patient outcomes. So I think, especially in the space around digital health, if we're working closely with the regulators, we all understand the risks that we're addressing for the benefits that we're trying to deliver, reducing people's time in hospital, reducing hopefully the fact that people need to go to hospital even in the first place, approaching it as managing wellness as opposed to treating illness, plays a huge role in improving how we think about healthcare. There's so many digital angles on managing that, from helping patients to manage long-term chronic conditions, helping people to not get to that situation in the first place. So a lot of the lifestyle management tools, and all of these are very accessible as well. So helping to bring regulators on that journey, I think, is incredibly important. And I think everybody in healthcare has a role to play in that.
Brilliant, very good points there. Parry, Aditya, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, from a regulation standpoint, there are really three aspects that I see that are challenging to most of the organizations. The first one being where to start in the regulatory assessment, and that's a big challenge. It's a very overwhelming process for those who haven't been through it before. So that's when you want to get those subject matter experts involved early in the game. So where to start is the first one. Second one is when and how to engage with the regulatory authorities. One of the recommendations that we make is you want to talk to regulatory authorities frequent and often, or early and often. It's more about, do we need a pre-sub meeting with the FDA, for example? That goes a long way. You get some insights into what they're thinking, what their requirements are, and you know a lot about your product in the process as well, and what changes you have to make. The third one would be actually how to be compliant, how to do that, how to follow the design controls process, how to follow the SAMD regulations and all the documentation that you have to create. The word documentation brings so much of a burden when it comes to software as a medical device. But as Maria and Aditya will agree with me, for those who have been there and done that, it becomes easier for them. So partnering with the right people to get that started early enough, I think that's the key.
Yeah, and I mean, I basically, like, I agree with everything, both of you have said. I think, like I would say, I think regulation is somewhat of a challenge, but I think if you look back as to why this regulation came about, you realize how important it is that it actually exists, because it exists to protect patients and protect people, right? And we don't want to put technology into the world willy-nilly and hope that everything will be fine, because many times the motivation behind this regulation often is because something has gone wrong in the past, right? And I think if you understand that and know that everyone's coming from a good place, I think figuring out the processes, as Pari mentioned, that has been a challenge for us, absolutely. But at the same time, you realize the importance of it, and you want to work through it. I would say, I think the most important thing to understand here is, I would say regulation, and I think we might have discussed this before, regulation is not the biggest barrier to innovation in this space. There's a lot more other things that are a lot more complicated than regulation. There are, I guess maybe a different way to put it, there's probably a lot of medical devices that have been approved by the FDA that nobody cares about, right? And see no use. Sure, you built it, but that had absolutely no impact. And the FDA said, yes, cool, you built it and we approve of it, but nobody's using it. What's the point, right? And I think the real challenge here is figuring out what's actually going to be useful. And then, once you do that, I think the FDA is just there to help protect you from making mistakes that you would regret down the line, as well as protect the patients who would get harmed from this.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Working out that unmet need, whether it's from a clinician's perspective, a patient's perspective, or anybody else, that's the thing that drives the value of the product. And what we don't want to do is develop technology for technology's sake. We want to make sure that it's useful and that it's helping. And I think, yeah, the point there is exactly that, like working closely with the regulators to make sure that the valuable product, meets the market at the right place and really does have an impact. And I think that's where, often in the early stages of product development, you're so focused on getting, started with the software or started with the design that actually you haven't had the conversations with the clinicians or the people who really understand the area to either go, is this a problem or is this a risk that you're seeing, or how do we overcome this challenge? And Pari, as you said, having the regulator and clinicians on side as you have those kind of early design discovery discussions, that is super important.
Yeah, I really like the point that both of you have made. Aditya, especially, you said, it's all about the safety and efficacy of the product, right? And the regulations are there to help you. They're almost like guardrails. And to be honest, it's nothing out of the ordinary when you're thinking about developing a product, right? You wanna write down your requirements. Make sure that you test your requirements, you document your requirements, because if everybody gets a new job and everybody's gone, if the whole new crew comes in, somebody wants to figure out how this product was developed, it's useful from that perspective also, if you think about it just from a purely business standpoint, right? And the regulations don't tell you anything else other than also the safety and efficacy and risk assessment of the product in terms of patient harm, right? So yeah, really good points.
Yeah. And just on that, I suppose, touching off the product development, the challenges in product development, and as more and more companies start to digitalize, I guess my question to the whole panel, what are the key challenges in digital product development?
Yeah, we touched on that a little bit. My favorite topic, and I think Maria spoke about it just, and Aditya did too. It's the unmet needs and focusing on the unmet needs. I'm an engineer, or used to be one too. I mean, as engineers, we think like, oh, I've got this cool new technology, I got to build it. Well, nobody wants it, So just focusing on the unmet needs and actually investing time. And this is what we recommend to most of our clients at CDP. And they actually come to us for that purpose, because they are interested in actually conducting a thorough user research and talking to the end users to understand the real unmet needs and pain points, and then providing those in terms of features, at least as an MVP, and also it drives their roadmap moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, just to like, and I think, I mean, I totally agree. Like, identifying the need is essential. I think the other thing that might happen, at least we see it at times in pathology, is, people are used to doing things a certain way. Getting people to change that is very difficult. And I think even though the new technology is better, oftentimes, and this is not true for everything, just to be clear, oftentimes, what will happen? Like, for example, if I try to change the workflow of a pathologist, they'd be like, I'm now a whole lot slower, but that will change because they have gotten trained to be that fast through, say, 15 years of training, and they're experts in that now, right? And when you start changing that up, you start making people are averse to change, I think, in general. And that also leads to adoption, like being slower. And hence you might be like, oh, I'm not building the right product and so on. But oftentimes, you might actually be doing it, but it takes a little bit of time to see the impact and the outcome of that. And I think especially in the the world, like the software development world, like the agile world, where you're used to getting, like, especially if you're coming from consumer apps or something, right? Like, you're used to getting feedback super fast. That's not going to, like, that can be a hindrance because you're not going to get that feedback super fast. You don't want to overreact because people might be like, oh, I'm so slow now. Because there's just been so much training. And, the type of users you have now, like, depending again on the specific technology, some might be directed towards consumers again, but some is directed towards physicians and doctors who, over years have actually developed really good ways and really fast ways of doing these things. And you may not even need to go digital to make things better. Although, many times you do, but figuring that out and waiting for that adoption to be sticky is sort of crucial, I think.
Yeah, and I as an engineer as well, it pains me to put on my commercial hat here, but there also needs to be a value proposition from somebody's perspective. Why are we going digital? What is the difference that it's going to make? And I think at the moment, a lot of people are trying to work out what value digital is going to bring, to them. They have, let's say, if you're working with a pharma company or with a medical device company, they have maybe products or drugs already in the market. What is this going to add over and above that makes it all worth it? And then you're into interesting discussions about, are you building technology? Are you buying technology? Where are the right decisions going to be made there? Obviously, as a digital health platform provider, we would recommend that you involve us in your digital health journey. But we have a lot of experience in coaching people through, what are the reasons that you're going digital? What does it mean for your product roadmap? Maybe you are engaged with a certain patient population now, but actually, with a digital health solution in support of a drug delivery device, let's say, you could engage with a lot more patients, understand more about how people are using it, help them to be more compliant with the drugs that you're using, and actually drive better outcomes through that, and also maybe help people early in their journey so that they won't need to progress through their disease states quite so much. So I think thinking about the product journey and not just that one kind of that first product that you're trying to solve, trying to keep that whole big picture and that strategy in mind, and then what value it's going to bring, both for the company and for the users at the end of the day.
Brilliant. No, some fantastic points there. Thank you, everyone, for your contribution there. If any of our attendees on this stream or on LinkedIn do have any questions, feel free just to drop them into the comment box or drop them into the Q&A box. Now, I guess another key topic that I was keen to touch on, it's in the name of one of our panelists, artificial intelligence. You know, AI, it's one of the foremost technological advancements that is impacting medicine. It's a topic that we could talk about for days, right? And it's one that we've actually had a whole webinar on in the past with Biotalent Social. But again, I think it's so important in a conversation on technology and medicine that we acknowledge the profound impact AI is having on the medical sector. Now, something that perhaps is not considered in a lot of conversations, however, is the validation side. How do we validate AI? How do you prove that an algorithm is continuously learning? How do you validate AI in drug manufacturing, in clinical trials, etc.? So Aditya, I guess if we start with you on this one, when it comes to AI, how can we go about validating our data?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, I think in general, right? Like it's like I think the process for validation is probably the same as what you would follow for any drug or anything else that you're trying to test, right? Like you set up an experiment with a control arm, and the impact, like the new thing that you're trying to evaluate. Like for example, in our case, if we're trying to evaluate that, say, pathologists are more accurate using our technology versus not using our technology, you'd essentially set up a control arm where someone's not using our technology, and for a data set where you already have the answers, and then for another, like to know the impact of using our technology, you would either set it up to have a different set of pathologists using our technology. For that, you need a larger number, or if you have the same pathologist with a certain like washout period, you have a smaller number of pathologists. You set that up and see what is the impact of that particular thing, right? So I would say, and this is similar to a drug trial where you might say, okay, let me use the standard treatment versus this new treatment. How long did patients live based on that? Because essentially what the treatment is trying to say is that, the survival of patients is longer if you'd use this new treatment. So I think the validation process is actually like, you'd have certain nuances and such. I think the part that maybe becomes a little bit interesting for AI, and this is something that remains to be seen. One of the interesting things that some of you might have seen in the media, I think this was more popular. Like, I mean, it's still something that people are working on, but was more on the forefront maybe about 6 months, a year ago, was around like bias in AI, where you might have seen like certain articles about Google misclassifying people as monkeys and things like that, and that essentially comes about because of bias in the data set. I think what's going to be very interesting, and the bias in the data set might come about not intentionally, but because maybe they collect data a particular way, you end up having a data set that looks different from the data set that you're going to test on. The thing that I've actually personally been thinking about with respect to validating technology in this space is, are there going to, like, so for example, in pathology, right? Like there may not be things that are known that are different in the tissue specimen of people, say, of different age or different race or different gender, right? Apart from obviously, there may be certain organs that only people of certain gender have and not others. But outside of that, there may be subtle differences that exist. And these may not be picked up by humans as actively. And because they're not picked up by humans, we might say, okay, in order to validate it, these are not factors that you have to take into account. Whereas the technology might actually be picking up on signal in those images that allows you to have that differentiation, but we as humans don't know it, right? And that might mean that we actually need to start balancing and accounting for all of those factors when we're validating our algorithm, that it actually works across, say, the full age range, or the different genders or different races and so on, which might not be on the medical, like might not be on top of the list for FDA right now, because a human will say, oh yeah, I see no difference, but maybe the AI does. And if the AI does, we should be thinking about how to validate it. So that's just, an additional angle that we've been thinking about more recently.
What did the rest of Parry, Maria, what are your thoughts on this one?
Aditya is an expert. He covered it really, really well. I mean, the only thing I would add, and it's probably a little more high level, is the foundation of AI is data, right? And and really what triggers the data is the engagement. So that's my focus throughout building digital health apps, has been focusing on the engagement aspect of things, which creates a great foundation to kind of maximize the opportunity to collect that data, and then the AI sits on top of it.
Yeah, 100% agree on that one. I think, and the more digital health solutions become pervasive, the more data that we have access to, and then to Aditya's point, being able to run classifiers over and understand nuances in that data that aren't apparent to humans is just fascinating. I think there's so much that we're going to learn from what can be established in AI. Yeah, I mean, I love the fact, we talk AI as if it's new, that the algorithms for learning and neural networks have been around for so long now, but right now we've got the technology to be able to execute it fast enough that we can actually make decisions based off it. So yeah, really excited about the future for AI.
I think those are all great points. I just want to add another angle to this, which I thought was, which I think sometimes people confuse with validation. I thought it might be worth highlighting, is around the, understanding what's going on in neural networks. So, as Maria said, these things have been around for a long time, right? And despite how long this technology has existed, I think we have a fairly limited understanding of how the model makes the decisions that it's making. And I think sometimes people tend to confuse that aspect. So it's often thought of as a black box, rightfully so. There's a lot of people doing phenomenal research on trying to figure out, how the model's making these decisions. But at least as far as, we've seen from the regulatory bodies, this is not, this is, I mean, they care about it and they think it's important that we understand the technology better. But as far as validating it goes, you actually, it almost doesn't matter, exactly what is happening in them. And one of the ways to think about it is, there are actually drugs on the market where we don't completely understand the pathway, but we can see the effect of that drug regardless. And it's a positive effect. You can study it using experiments. You don't have to know exactly, it's affecting this molecule in the brain and hence causing this output. And that's the similar, that's another, that's how I think the FDA tends to think about deep networks or neural networks as well, is as long as you show that, what you are claiming is what is observed through experiments, you don't exactly have to know how all of these things work. And yeah, I just thought I'd bring it up because it's a topic that's often confused with, oh, but you have no idea how it works. But guess what? We've approved many things that we have no idea how it works, but we can show it does. So it's fine.
You spoke about black boxes there, Aditya, and with healthcare professionals wanting to and being used to controlling everything, how reliable are black boxes in healthcare?
I mean, I think it's basically answered in the previous question. I think the black boxes are essentially, you validate and you show, right? As long as you're doing a great job setting up your experimental setting of keep your train set and test set separate, you're validating across, different, for us, it's say different labs where the same technology can be applied, where the pre-processing might be different and hence, the model needs to generalize. As long as you've validated across a variety of, use cases or variability in the data, you can, I think, trust that it will work under that range of variation, right? Once you start going outside, it's anybody's guess what's going to happen, right? So it's not magic, right? I think we use the word AI, but honestly, the real like the only piece I think of AI that has like I guess that maybe most of us are talking about now, and there's other pieces there that people have made progress, but the one piece that we talk about most frequently now is pattern recognition. And all we're doing is recognizing that same pattern over and over again reliably, right? And if we're like, and hence, if we have shown that you can do this under a certain set of conditions, you can trust that black box under those conditions, but not too much outside it, right? And that's where this bias question comes up again, because oftentimes it's not that the computer can't be trained to distinguish between people and monkeys. It's just that the data set that was initially created was not under the same conditions under which it was tested. And if it hasn't been tested in those conditions, it'll have unintended outputs, right? And that's why this problem of how you build the data set and data set bias becomes so important. And then to show that you have taken all of that into consideration, you need to demonstrate that in your validation set by constructing that in a very careful way. And then obviously you got to do experiments in a controlled way, which is required by the regulatory guidelines anyway, which as rightfully should be.
Yeah, I think that question of bias in algorithms is a fascinating one, and as somebody who has to speak at a slightly lower octave to my Google Maps in the car to get it to respond to me, I understand, and that's just at a normal level. You could understand why people are risk averse, I guess, when it comes to approving these sorts of algorithms. But I think, Aditya is entirely correct. If you think about, if you're building a software release and you're continuously running it against your versioned test cases and your versioned data sets, and you're consistently showing the same output as you add and add and add, I think there are very sensible reasons to say why you can validate. I think where it becomes interesting is when you think about when it's learning, how do you move forward? And I think that's probably still going to be quite an open question as we go forward.
Massively, definitely. Brilliant. No, thank you, Maria, Aditya, and Parry, for your input on those ones. Again, with regards to artificial intelligence, if we do have any questions, be sure to pop them into the Q&A box. Now, another topic, I think, if we're talking about advancements in technology, is going to be on digitalization, right? I know Parry mentioned it a bit earlier, how a lot of companies want to adopt software as a medical device. They want digitalized, but they don't actually understand, of course, everything that comes with that. And I guess something we've seen a lot of, especially in the current healthcare crisis during COVID-19, people have been unable to visit their doctor. So healthcare has been completely digitalized, right? You can go on your phone, you can type in your symptoms and you know what's wrong with you within 30 seconds. Do we think that this current situation, and I can open this out to the whole panel, do we think that this current situation is going to jeopardize or enhance the future of healthcare?
I'll go first. I think it's definitely going to enhance the future of healthcare. There's no question about it. We live in the world of Uber Eats and Google Maps. Maria said Google Maps, right? I mean, on the consumer side of us, right, we expect a certain convenience, certain level of features at our fingertips. Now, the question is, why can't we have the same in healthcare, right? And that question has been there for all along, but now COVID has just kind of fast-tracked the solutions to address that question, right? So because it's the need, there is no other alternative for us. So I think it's definitely going to enhance it. Now, when you look at the US payer system and everything, there are some nuances that still have to be addressed, but at least some of the ones that don't have a lot of complicated payer reimbursement models, are the easier ones to go first with digitizing the whole the healthcare services aspect of it. So I definitely think it's going to enhance it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can only say enhance as well, obviously. I mean, I think if it drives standardization around how data is shared, you know, across electronic medical records, if it helps us to kind of create that ecosystem where, my information in the UK can be shared when I travel across Europe or across the globe, I think that is exactly where it needs to go. And I think a lot of companies have made quite a lot of money by siloing a lot of the data. So for sure, I think it's going to open it up, not without risk, obviously, because I think, to one of the early points made about regulations earlier, what we don't want to do is rush head straight into some of these innovations without considering the risks. And opening up patient data is a very thorny topic. Making sure that everybody remains anonymous and non-traceable is incredibly important. Staying within, GDPR is a fantastic regulation in Europe that gives people control over their data, which is great. And making sure that we're all compliant with that is hugely important. But the risks around, cybersecurity that you need to think about when you're building data products now, and not leaving yourself open to attacks or risks, and safeguarding, everything about your patient and their medical records is super important. So absolutely, I think it's fundamentally changing the landscape, but yeah, there are things to do to make sure we do it in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add to that. I think Pari and Maria are probably more experts in this area. But what I can say is I mean, I couldn't, like, it will certainly, I think, enhance things to digitalize things further. I mean, the way I think about it, like, in order to build AI, like, we need data. And right now, data, like, while I think some of that data exists, it exists in silos, and it is actually very difficult to access that data. One of the other things that I'll just add to, I think, what Maria and Pari had said was around, structure. I think in order to learn from data, like, so far, all the data has been recorded in a very unstructured format. And I hope that, as these new technologies come in, and, like, things become more open, things become more shareable, one of the things that's very likely to happen is that there's going to be a little bit more standardization and structure added around the data, which will actually allow us to build, a ton of cool new technology to learn from that data, to provide, better insights to patients. Mm-hmm. One of the things I do, I just do think about is, as we, like, I think getting all the data to be digital is great. I do think about, like, for diagnosis online, and as we build more and more tools to help people with diagnosis, I feel like, if you, like, start with anything you're feeling, and you probably have a brain tumor according to WebMD. But that's the place I hope we don't end up in. And I think we've all seen that outcome in terms of, like, sharing too much data, right? And I think it's those tools, how we build it now on top of the data that we start acquiring. That's going to be extremely, extremely interesting, but we're going to have to do it in a careful way so as to not overburden the I guess healthcare system with everyone thinking that they have a brain tumor. Yeah.
That's a super interesting point. And I think that's the point, I think, about data anyway. I think everybody thinks, oh, I've got loads of data, but actually trying to think about what are the decisions that we can make with this. And so what are the actual interesting data points in and amongst what we need to be capturing. Therefore, not necessarily capturing everything about somebody, but really focusing on the information that's going to help make the right decisions. Because otherwise it's so easy to be overwhelmed and not really sure, what is the question I'm asking of the data, and like you said, end up with an answer that equals brain tumor. That would be pretty bad.
Absolutely. Fantastic. No, very good points there. Thanks again for all your contributions on that one. Now, just as we come to the end, I guess kind of a broad open question I wanted to ask to the panel. And going back to the whole idea of innovation and technology sparking innovation to improve medicine, to improve healthcare. How do we see innovation in technology addressing the challenges that healthcare is facing? What's the future for innovation in technology? I'm going to nominate Parry to go first on that one.
All right. It's a broad question. I mean, technology has proven to help already. I mean, at one point, it's all about a couple of things. It's all about improving the clinical outcomes from a provider standpoint, and all about improving the health outcomes from a patient standpoint. Now, diabetes in digital health space is a very, very mature market in terms of digital products and how they have actually helped, how the technology has actually helped people get their condition in control. Like a few years ago, I mean, you wouldn't think about a type 2 diabetes patient walking around with a continuous glucose monitor and getting dose recommendations and not having to question how much insulin I have to take right now. And now we're talking about a closed loop system, which is almost like an artificial pancreas, which is automatically will give you the dose insulin that you need based on the continuously monitored glucose data. So all of that is to say, the fact that we can sense the right parameters, the fact that we can display those parameters to the right stakeholders, and 3, we can apply algorithms for the technology to automatically administer certain drug dosages and so on and so forth. That's the evidence of technologies already helping in the healthcare space, and sky's the limit from that point onward.
Brilliant. Aditya Maria, do you have anything to add to what Parry said?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with what Parry said, and it's also just like I guess it's a fairly broad question. I think there's going to be I think the impact technology has had on medicine is tremendous, and I think we're just at the beginning, compared to most other industries. So I think a lot of innovation is going to happen like across the board in medicine. It's really hard to, I think, pinpoint any one thing. So I'll just talk about maybe the one we're personally working on, and that we're excited about, which is to do with matching patients to the right treatments. And I think this will have a pretty big, or at least I think it'll have a pretty big impact in the future. Where I think we've talked about personalized medicine for a long time. I think there's some demonstrations of that. But now with machine learning, we'll be able to take into account so much information about a patient, and hopefully suggest medications that can help make significant advance, like help them be cured of certain majorly life-threatening diseases. So at least in the care of cancer, one of the things that is happening is there are many more treatments that are available. But those treatments only work for a certain subset of the patients, right? So it's not like, for some subset of patients, it actually can help cure them of cancer completely. But identifying that right subset is extremely challenging, right? Because you want to do it before giving that treatment to the person, because, the treatment may actually have adverse consequences, or it may delay you taking a different treatment that may actually be the right treatment, during which time the disease has progressed and you're not able to come back from it anymore, right? And so I think this is one of the things I'm excited about, where each of us is very different, and to tailor medication to each of our specific needs is going to be the future, I think. And even the other thing that is just very basic things that are bizarro to me right now that we can actually do is like, if you take a blood test, right, your blood parameters actually change, and it's been observed with age, with just certain, like with time and so on. But the chart, like if they tell you, okay, your cholesterol or like your certain hormones have to be in this range, they're just doing it based on like 95th percentile average, right? Whereas for you, like if you're of a certain age, maybe a certain, like a hormone should be much higher, while you might fall in the 95th percentile, but given your age, that's actually a bad result. But nobody takes that into account right now. And that type of personalization can easily happen with the data that we already have. And I think the thing that needs to happen is that, like, we need to just be, like, we need to try out a lot more of these things and be open to that change that is coming. But I think a big theme in general is going to be personalization, and having data that is, much more specific to you than like, oh, you have this disease, go take this one treatment. That is, like that. It's almost like, right now, I think that's a bigger way of how medicine tends to work. It's sort of like a lookup table, but it cannot be that way if we want to go making significant advances in the future.
I mean, yeah, to that point, there's so many exciting things happening in medical technology at the moment. To that point, what the world is doing with cell and gene therapy is fascinating. Being able to to grow cells to reboot your immune system and fight cancer, and seeing the results that's having in clinical trials is amazing. And building that ecosystem, whether digitally and supplemented by cell and gene manufacturing, to actually deliver those real personalized medical solutions is I think we're so close to that being realistic. Then it was interesting when I was asked to do this webinar, just kind of thinking back on how much technology has evolved, even since I've been involved in tech, and as a teenager coding in my bedroom and working on Internet of Things devices before Internet of Things was a thing. Seeing how cloud has really unlocked this global digital ecosystem is amazing. And if we get the engagement, like phones have today, like where NB-IoT might be heading in the future, enabling this future of everybody being understanding their biological parameters, understanding their environmental impacts, being able to predict how your health is going to be managed over your lifetime. I think we're not too far away from that. Where we're headed with AI and advanced algorithms is phenomenal. And with quantum around the corner, who knows what's possible.
Brilliant. No, it's massive. I think in terms of how far technology has come and in terms of where it's going, we're seeing more and more companies, like I said at the start, coming out of the woodwork, grabbing this opportunity, using advancements in technology to create new innovative products. And it's fantastic to see. So yeah, the future for technology in medicine is certainly very, very bright. Just conscious of time, but we're going to try get through, we might only actually have time for one or two questions from our attendees, but if we don't get around to you, we will send the questions around to the panelists afterwards, and we will try and get back to you. But let's just pick one here out of the Q&A box. So Natsia is the most recent one in there. They're asking, what challenges do you think may be faced in implementing personalized medication? Does anyone want to take the lead on that one?
Sure, I can answer that. I think like, at least my perspective, I think the biggest challenge here is going to be just the data. Like the biggest challenge is, I think the data is not available in a way that is clean, it is well structured, it is easy to learn from, in order to disambiguate, signal from noise, essentially. So if you think about, each patient's journey, like firstly, how all the data is recorded is completely different across different medical systems. Right. So in order for a machine to learn, you need all that data structured in the same way, and input into the ML algorithm. It's not going to just suddenly, like, it's not magic. It's not going to figure out that, oh, when Dr. A says this, Dr. B says this, they actually mean the same thing. Somebody's going to need to disambiguate all of that. The other is that all the patients are not on the same journey, right? And like you might have different levels of adherence with medication, and there are many companies and startups focused on that space. Patient might say they're doing X, but they're not doing X. Like I don't know if you, like, I'm sure all of you know, like, if you go to a physician's office and you tell them you have 1 drink a week, they just multiply it by 4, because that's what people are typically reporting, and versus the truth, right? So a lot of that type of data just doesn't exist at a scale that is large enough for us to be able to learn signal from noise. And I think in order to do that, it's going to be difficult. And then to do that and then demonstrate that in a clinical trial, incredibly expensive. So I think those are probably the biggest challenges to, like, the rest of the stuff. If you can demonstrate it, like distributing it and all that, like, those are things that you can all figure out, because then you have shown, you've shown an unmet need. Then it's just a matter of like time and how well we execute. Those are easy. I think showing it to begin with in a definitive way, extremely difficult.
Yeah, it's interesting because I totally take your point, Aditya, and maybe building on that, actually manufacturing doses for N of 1 and proving that you've made that N of 1 correctly. There are so many challenges around that as well to come, and distribution and everything like that. But I think that is definitely a challenge. But I think as we build up that data set and try and figure out exactly what we are trying to solve for, what is it about that manufacturing process? I think there needs to be a fundamental shift in how we develop drugs, I think, once we get into personalization.
And just to add to that, just minimizing the number of data sources that we put on the patient, for example, or the person with the condition. And how do we don't want to enable them with 15 different data sources. And then we say, okay, we have a very finite data set and a data that we're very confident in order for us to recommend, say, example, a dose, right? How do we minimize the number of things that we can do? How we can be intelligent about collecting information without overburdening the end user. That's going to be the key.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, look, we might have time for one more quick question then. There's an interesting one here from Yuvraj, apologies. And they're asking about how the quality and regulatory perspective is different in the case of a complex class 3 medical device and a complex algorithm-based software as a medical device. Someone want to take the lead in that one? Or we can go on to the next.
I can just, like, I'm no medical device expert, but I think essentially there can be any, like, an algorithm can be a class 1, can be a class 2, can be a class 3 medical device. Like, this is not like a complex, like, essentially the class of the medical device is applied based on the risk and I think the use cases and so on of what you're building. So, and the algorithms used to, like, it really depends what it's, if it's a simple algorithm that poses no risk to the patient, it might just be a class 1 medical device, no matter how complicated the algorithm is. Whereas if it poses significant risk, it is a class 3, and that's what.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah,
Ahead,
that's.
Maria.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that that's completely correct. If what you're doing is providing, not even guidance, just information, an algorithm could tell you, oh, I've heard your breath, or are you breathing well? It may not provide any indications, therefore not even be a medical device in some instances. So I think it all depends on what you're doing with it, what the level of risk is, and the safety of it and efficacy of what you're trying to achieve. And, you know, I think you apply the same rules, you know, in Europe from an MDR perspective. It's pretty good guidance right now in terms of what different classifications are for products. So if we're providing clinicians with an opportunity to guide or to make decisions on a patient outcome, then that's, you know, a 2A minimum, you know, and whether that's an algorithm or a mobile app, it's all the same, really. So it's really about what it is that you're trying to do with the software.
And I agree. I think from a class 3 medical device or a class 3 software as medical device, I don't think the classification is risk-based, like both of you said. If the risk, we're talking about class 3 medical device, about pacemakers, implantable devices, right? The risk of that to cause harm to patient leading to death, right? If that's higher, right, then it becomes a class 3 medical device, and there are more risks in that domain. Then yes, it actually applies the same way to algorithms. Also, if the risk is to a point that's comparable to an implantable device, then you're again in class 3 domain. So no difference in my view.
But then you've got, you know, you're talking about how you design your software in those sorts of scenarios to ensure, you know, you're segregating your risk and you're not exposing areas of the system. So you don't want, let's say, your entire solution potentially to be class 3, but you're really focusing your risk and therefore your, you know, your level of engineering on the areas that really demand it.
Absolutely, brilliant. Well, look, I think that's about all we actually have time for in the live panel discussion. You will see in the chat box, Lucy is putting in a link to our virtual networking session. But yeah, that's about it from us, folks. Thank you so much for sharing your morning, your evening, or your lunchtime with us, again, depending on where in the world you are. And a massive thank you to Aditya, to Maria, and to Parry for participating in this. You guys have been amazing, and to our amazing audience for participating as well. We hope you enjoy us in our next webinar, which will be in September. Details of this will be announced over the next few weeks. And for those of you that do want to continue the discussion further, including the panelists, please do join our networking rooms. The link is in the chat. You can meet our panel. You can discuss topics that we spoke about today. So be sure to click on that link when we leave this. But yeah, that's it from me. Thank you everyone for attending. And we hope to see you at our next BioTalent Social webinar. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Darren, for hosting.
Yep.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
See
you.
you in the
Bye.
next. Bye-bye.
Bye.